Hi guys, this is Satella, and today is Health and Wealth Wednesday. We're going to be talking today about 4D consciousness, awareness, shadow work, and the dark night of the soul. Just a bit of housekeeping. I would ask you, please subscribe and share this video. As you know, for it to be seen by more people, you need to subscribe and share and like. I would appreciate it, and it would help me out a lot. A few weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, we spoke about 5D consciousness and food. And I said I would go into a bit about 4D, because a lot of people seem to just want to jump from 3D into 5D, and that's just not going to happen. It doesn't work that way. It's a process. There's a level of awakening on each of these levels that is happening. In 4D, consciousness, awareness, awakening, you're going to be dealing with a transformation process, a letting go. There's the ego death that's going to take place of the false self so that the true self can come true. I want to share this in Romans 12 and verse 2. And this is from the Amplified Bible. It says, "Do not be conformed to this world, this age, fashioned after and adapted to its external, superficial customs, but be transformed, changed by the entire renewal of your mind, by its new ideals and its new attitude, so that you may prove for yourselves what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of Yahweh, even the thing which is good and acceptable and perfect in his sight for you." You know, Carl Jung says, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And I can tell you that's true. The dark night of the soul is a term that comes from St. John of the Cross. It really is a crisis of faith and life. You're having a rebirth experience. The dark night of the soul can be likened to a depression, but it's not a depression, because depression in of itself is a mental health disorder, and that's not what we're talking about here. And if you are suffering with any mental health issues, please seek the help of a mental health expert or physician. I am not a doctor. What I am sharing here is my experience and the experience of many other persons who have gone through a spiritual rebirth experience that feels like a depression on many levels. It's akin to a very dark place of isolation and transformation, much like the butterfly goes through a metamorphosis. This is what is happening in the dark night of the soul. You're changing, truly, you're changing. And you're changing your thinking because you're changing your life. You're becoming someone new. 4D consciousness is where we do the heavy lifting of dealing with childhood wounds, childhood traumas, inner child work. That's the shadow work. that's in the dark night of the soul, which is the ego death. You're feeling this need for separation from the 3D consciousness is really in full gear. You find yourself shedding the need of old routines and habits and that no longer serve you. All you know is something has changed deep inside of you, and you require more from life. And you need answers, but those answers are only going to come in the dark night of the soul. You're asking the question, is there more to life than this ego matrix hustle culture? Who is God? Is God real? If God is real, why am I here? And why does life hurt so much? All you know for sure is that my life must have a purpose beyond the accumulation of material things and dealing with toxic relationships and people who seem soulless. And truth be told, you find yourself not wanting to be alive anymore. Life seems filled with despair and hopelessness. Your body seems chronically filled with pain. Emotionally, you're exhausted. You just want some kind of relief. Now you're ready for something more. Your very soul at its core is vibrating at a frequency of oneness and openness, of transformation that awakens your spiritual journey of the dark night of the soul. You see, it's like a paradox. On one hand, it's painful, it's agonizing. You really don't want to go through it, but you have to open yourself to it. The work begins of dealing with your traumas. Those traumas that you agreed to as a part of your soul contract. Yes, you did. You agreed to it. You said, there's something I'm going to learn out of this experience that I'm going to go through. Whether it was a car accident, whether it was the death of a child, whether it was a divorce, whether it was a rape, whether it was incest, whether it was sexual abuse of some kind, whether it's a mental disorder, bipolar or schizophrenia, everything, because you are I am. And as I am, you said, I'm going to experience this aspect. You agreed to it, which sounds a little like, why would I agree to that? Because it's a part of the uplifting, it's a part of the awakening that you said, those are the things I wanted to experience in the process of my awakening. So the self-healing journey and the shadow work, dealing with the traumas, whether from your childhood to adulthood, is painful. It means confronting aspects of our lives that for the most part, we just want to hide away from. But for the healing to even begin, shadow work and reflecting on our emotional wounds is a road that must be traveled. Trauma is emotional, physical, and psychological. Trauma, whether emotional or psychological, makes you feel unsafe or helpless even angry. Traumas can be physical, like I said, the car accident or an assault of some kind. Trauma of any kind can and will have a mental impact on us. And I think and really believe that the mental impact of traumas is far more devastating than even the physical ones, because eventually there will be some type of healing of the physical traumas. And if you do the work, it would be the healing of the mental and emotional healing, those psychologicals. But our traumas is the lens of which and by which we see our life and who we are in life. You know, if you grew up in an abusive household where you were beaten, or you watch your mother being beaten, abused by your father or some other male figure in the house, you grow up feeling very unsafe, and you have a lot of trust issues. You have a lot of love issues. You may grow up yourself to be a person who abuses someone else. But then if you go through the dark night of the soul, the awakening process is going to allow a shedding to come, because awareness happens in the dark night of the soul, which is the 4D consciousness. And again, remember, 4D consciousness, like all levels of consciousness, is not a place. It is a new perspective, a new view of how you're looking at something, how you're understanding it, processing it. Self-awareness is the first step to 4D consciousness. And it's where you're asking a lot of questions, doing the work of the dark night of the soul, entering the void. You enter the void of shedding your old identity and belief systems. Essentially, you are adrift in a vast ocean with shifting waves. The self, as you know it, the false self, is being removed. You lose a sense of time and purpose. Everything you have ever believed, that foundation is being pulled away, stripped away, leaving you confused, grappling with extreme sadness. You're questioning everything. Nothing seems to be going right. And it's a good thing, because it's the death of the ego. Your ego is being transmuted and alchemized. It's agonizing. The false self is being discarded for your true higher Christ consciousness self to emerge. Isaiah 48 and verse 10 says, I have refined you true, though not as silver. I have tested you in the furnace of affliction. Let me read that again. Isaiah 48 and verse 10 says, I have refined you, though not as silver. I have tested you in the furnace of affliction. In Isaiah 43 and verse 2, it says, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. Through the rivers, they will not overwhelm you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned or scorched, nor will the flame kindle upon you. You know, I remember one of my dark night of the soul experiences. I was living abroad. Yahweh had asked me to quit my job. This was back in the 90s. And in fact, it was 1990. I was making four figures, $5,000 as a a young 27-year-old woman who was fantastic. Was traveling a lot. Life seemed perfect. I was very much a product of that 3D consciousness reality, very driven, very success oriented. But yet at the same time, I grew up in the church. So I had this calling on my life, this connection to God at the time. But I still very much wanted to be my own person and do things in my own way. And Yahweh says to me, quit your job and go off to college. And I'm like, why would I do that? I'm in the midst of trying to decide whether to buy a house or a rental income property. And he said, you said you wanted to follow me and serve me. So I'm telling you to go away. You could do what you want to do. I decided I didn't want to go away. And so I remained for another 5 years. And in 95, the question was asked of me again in one of my worship moments in the presence of Yahweh. And then I just committed. It was terrifying. I didn't know anyone in America. I didn't know how to drive. I'm from the Bahamas. We drive on the left side, on the other side, opposite of you. And I was afraid, but yet I knew being asked again, it was something in this that was important for me. You see, the dark night of the soul is just not one night. It could be a process of years, because in the space of those 5 years before I actually left, a lot of things began to shift. That drive for success caused me to leave the company I was with and join another company where we helped to, open up those offices. And again, was still making 4 figures, sometimes 5 figures. And it was good. It was so good that I was able to pay for my first 2 years of college up front. I really didn't want to go on one level. On the next level, I was like, I don't feel I could not do this. So I did. And that started a whole nother process of success and failure that went on. And I remember as one of the things in my dark night of the soul experiences after I'd left, ran out of money, had to come back home, worked for a year, got some money, still very much conscious, success-driven, 3D matrix thinking, didn't know that's what it was at the time. All I knew was that I wanted to be extremely successful and take care of my family. And with that as my driving factor and wanting to be an entrepreneur, I took off again, only this time with the intention to go back into the university and finish. Never did it. Got caught up in working and eventually had to return home again, very much feeling like a failure. But I remember having an experience while I was there of starting my Christian ministry and wanting to be and have a big church and all of this stuff. And I remember when Yahweh gave me an experience, I was trying to catch a train in a vision, and I kept not seeming to be able to catch the train. And there was this huge, vast field of yellow flowers, and I was getting frustrated and upset. And all of a sudden, Yeshua, Jesus, was there in my presence in this vision. And he hugged me, and I began to weep bitterly because I couldn't understand why I wasn't being successful. And he turns me around in this vision. And you know how dreams are? It just opened up, and there was a scene of him on the cross, and then of him rowing in a boat. And he said, that the train was not for you. This is for you. And I said, wow, but that looks like so much suffering. I'm already suffering. I don't know what's going on. From the moment I begin to be committed to you and follow you, I'm not making any money. I'm at the mercy of people. I'm not being successful, and I'm used to being successful. And, but what he was showing me was that you had an ego. I had an ego that probably was the size of Mount Everest, but I didn't know that. And he was saying, all of this must die. He's saying, take up your cross daily. You have to lose your life to find it. That is really what the dark night of the soul is about. You've got to lose your life in the sense of give up that false identity. Keeping up with the Joneses, as it were, trying to, have all the cars, the stuff, and all of these different things. You're chasing the wrong thing, and oftentimes we don't know it. For me, I had several nights of the dark night of the soul in my 4D consciousness awakening. I remember when I came back finally to the Bahamas in 2004, it was as if Yahweh put a hedge of protection around me and kept me. And then eventually I got a job working with the government as a supervisor, did that for several years, was very fulfilling. But again, I never went back to making those 4 figures on a monthly basis. But yet I was on some level satisfied. And then in 2008 or 7, just before the financial crisis, I had this experience where I was getting ready to buy this rental fourplex. I had favor with the bank again, and I was getting ready to do this. And in the midst of it, Yahweh tells me not to do it. I can get the vehicle, but not the building. I was a bit upset about it. But the following year, the crash happened in 2008, so he's actually protecting me. And see, this is one of the things about 4D spiritual awakening, awareness in your consciousness. If you begin to follow your intuition, it will always take care of you. It will always protect you. Because that higher self of you, the I am that is in you, that is leading you and guiding you, is able to tell you, hey, don't go down that street, go down this street. But if you don't listen, you're going to stay in this process longer than you have to. And I say to you again, the dark night of the soul, of the ego death, is just not one night. It can happen for a couple of months. It can happen for a couple of years, but it's a process that you're going to go to. Just recently, in my understanding, I said to Yahweh in one of my engagements, I said, listen, I recognize something here. On every level of consciousness that you go to, there's another dark night of the soul that you have to go through. But it seems to me that they happen quicker, and they have a different level to it, a different sort of understanding, because you're either at the beginning of your awakening in the 4D consciousness, you're in the middle, or you're at the end, or you've completed it. And then you can enter into 5D, which is a whole another level of consciousness, where you're able to see the things that are wrong, but only from the perspective of an observer, and not really get caught up in the emotions of it. The thing about 4D consciousness, as I said, it's a lot of questioning that goes on in that 4D awakening, because you are learning to ask the questions. Remember, I said to you that you agreed to these experiences that you're having. And once you begin to understand, you know what, I agreed to these things, then you now can ask yourself the question in the present moment: why did I choose this experience to happen? And what was it that my I am self wanted to learn in this process? And then, because you're asking the right question in the right frame, you get the correct answer, and you're able to process and move forward even at a quicker pace. I remember Yahweh in 2012, the whole collective went through what I call a collective ego debt, dark night of the soul experience ascension process. And I remember Yahweh saying to me, forget everything that you know. Forget everything that you think you know. Make space and room. I want to expand you. And in this process of expansion, there's growth, and then there's death again. But you're able to handle it again. But you also find yourself in isolation again. As long as you are on this spiritual journey, you will have dark nights of the soul. But you don't have to stay in 4D anymore, because you've learned how to handle them. You've learned how to process them in a better way. I remember being brought to a door, and then the door opened, and Yahweh said, walk in. It was pitch black. You could not see anything. But I'd learned. So I walked through, even though I was afraid. And all of a sudden, I was on the other side of what was this quintessent, beautiful, golden mountain. It was an incredible experience. There was another time when Yahweh, in a vision I had with him, we were standing on the seashore, and the waves, was this dark indigo waters that was raging and so high. And I'm looking up and looking down, and we're standing there, and he says, walk with me through the waters. And I'm like, are you crazy? You will drown if you go in there. And he said, do you trust me? And I said, yes. He said, then walk with me. And so I walked through the waters. All of a sudden, I was out on the other side on this beautiful beach, sunny with aquamarine waters. Dark nights of the soul in 4D consciousness is about you shedding the old false ego identity. And then so that the true self, your higher Christ consciousness self, can emerge. There's much more to talk about on this, and we'll pick this up next week. And we'll continue with the 4D process and 4D consciousness awakening and the dark night of the soul. I'm so looking forward to this. If you enjoyed this, again, I ask you please to like and subscribe and share the video. I love you, and I will see you in the next video.